That's right, it's finally here, the FMG9. This is the new FMG9 kit, which has come out from a Korean company called Aegis. It came out a couple of weeks ago in Asia. I think some of them are going to be making their ways over to the US and UK and such and so on. But if you want one right now, there may still be some available over in Hong Kong and Taiwan. This, I think, is a really impressive kit. This is different from an older version of the FMG9 made by KWA. This is a kit for Glocks. So this is just a normal Wii Glock slide inside. And this kit can take Wii, TM, and VFC, though I'm not sure of all the exact models. This is specifically generally for the Gen 3 of both TM and Wii, and I believe just the VFC 17. I hear that the 18 you can't use. But it's a really slick kit, I think, that gives you all the functionality of the FMG9, this nice little briefcase gun, if you will. So I'm going to go over a lot of the details of this. I want to show it off. I want to show the quality of the kit here. And then I'm also going to have a separate video for installation. This actually comes, at least the version I have, comes with no instructions of how to install. Not a problem if you know your way around airsoft guns, but plenty of people who buy this may be a little bit confused. So I'm going to make this video here, which you're watching right now, where I'll go over all the details of this and you'll see all the nice parts, and I'll show you how it all works and is put together. I'll also have a separate installation video for those of you who might be confused by how to put it together. You can watch out for that coming as well. So stick around and we're gonna take a close look at this. Now, zooming in here to see a bit of details. As mentioned, this is from a Korean company called Aegis, but it was made in Taiwan. The Korean company contracted out to some manufacturers in Taiwan, and then I believe it was sent back to Korea, where they did their checks and stuff. So even though I myself am in Taiwan right now, these actually had to get re-imported into Taiwan, and we got them a little bit later than they did in Korea. So Korea was the first place to get these. And you can go and search out some good Korean videos with lots of kind of nicely done cinematic looks at this piece of kit. But for me, I want to look up close here. So I'm gonna go from the top to the bottom and to the rear, taking you through all the various parts of this. So you open this up, of course, by hitting this. It's close here, so I'm gonna open it slowly, like so. Super nice. Oh, gotta put that in there. So you do actually sometimes need a little bit of momentum in order to get everything in. This is actually on a spring, so it springs it pretty well. But if you have a magazine or such in there, it can need a little bit of extra help, a little bit of kick or what have you to get it to open. So in the top here, you have your carrying handle, which also, let's see if I can get a good look at this. Yeah, has your iron sights there. It is also removable. It's actually super, super stiff. There we go. To the point it kind of hurts your fingers to pull this up here. This is just on a spring, which is quite a stiff spring, to put this on here. So you can put a red dot, you can put whatever you want on there, but having the carry handle is a nice classic look. Ooh. Actually, really, you see, tears up your fingers a bit because the spring is so sharp there. There's also room here on the front for, this is not a real one, this is a replica, but a TLR7 or similarly sized light will snap right on there. There you go. And then you can have yourself a little light. Inside of the upper here, we're going to see if we can get a good look at it. So this here is a little plate which connects to your charging handle, and you see here it has a little protrusion, and that protrusion essentially pushes against the front of the slide you have in here to make it operate like so. Now you might have noticed something if you have a sharp eye. During the introduction, I fired and this charging handle reciprocated. That charging handle actually isn't necessarily supposed to reciprocate, but I thought I would leave it reciprocating now by leaving on this front sight. So this front sight actually, I think you're most likely, again, there's no instructions to come with this, I think you're most likely supposed to take this off. And if you take this off, this handle does not reciprocate when firing. But if you leave it on, it actually slots perfectly sort of into this little recession here, which I think they may have intended, I'm not sure. And then by leaving that on, this will push against this bar when you fire, and it will have it reciprocate. The other thing which that top bar does is it has a spring here, a return spring for this top bar here, which also is what locks in the rear part, like so. It's also what is used to lock in the front part, just with this, when you have it fully folded, like so. It just goes in here, and then that is that there. So the charging handle is actually a bit stiff because up here, you're just pressing against, up to about here, right? You're just pressing against the return spring for that plate, if you will. Here, you're pressing against both that spring for the plate and your recoil spring for the gun. And this can, if you press it to a certain way, it kind of gets stiff, if you will. I've never had any issues cycling with this so far, but it is not exactly perfect and does need to be worn in a little bit. Another thing to note here is, let me take this off actually. You can actually go and take this off, bend this out a little bit, take this off pretty easily. You'd be tempted to think that you could put a tracer in the front here easily. This is about where it lies, by the way, with this front plate pressing up against here. You'd be tempted to think you could put in a tracer in this little spot easily. Unfortunately, it's just a tiny bit too small. This is a random tracer I have here that you see sits inside here. It actually fits inside this part, but then it's just too small for over here to fit in front. So you need to really, in order to fit that right, you probably have to have it around here. This is within 11 millimeter. So not quite right. It's almost just right if it's thin enough to fit in here. I have seen someone who's modified this to work with a tracer. I think what they used was they used a 5KU Spitfire tracer, which is an especially slim tracer. And I think that and a little bit of modification, maybe it worked. But unfortunately, standard tracers, your Ace Techs, your G&Gs, your X-Cortex and stuff are not going to quite fit in here. You will need some modification if you want to put a tracer on it. Though if you are able to put a Spitfire tracer like inside, it's going to be super cool. Insofar as the markings, we have here a nicely cut FMG9, which is the actual name that Magpul gave for their prototype. However, you don't have the Magpul company mark down here. Presumably they didn't do that because they didn't want to get in trouble for trademarks or wanted to be more easily able to import into the US. As is, because this isn't really based on a real production gun, only sort of a prototype from Magpul, I think that you're not going to have any trademark issues with this coming in. I'm not sure if they have a trademark for this name or not. Probably it's not something Customs is looking out for so much, so you should be okay. Unfortunately, sort of insofar as markings are concerned, they did stamp this really big made in Taiwan on both sides of it. I think maybe this is to help get through Customs so it doesn't look like an actual gun or an actual gun parts, perhaps, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's a requirement from the Korean side for them to import on their side. I have seen similar stamps on a bunch of airsoft guns in Korea, but it does look kind of ugly. I'm gonna see if there's a way I can take this off without damaging the surface quality of the nice nylon body here, but I'm not sure how successful that will be. I will report back if I do find a good way of doing that. Now going on inside here, as you can see, I do have this already installed with the slide, like so. And then you can remove the slide in the sort of normal Glock way all the way out the front, or actually a lot of people have seen this sort of already, is that putting the front back on here. A lot of people seem to think you have to take this off to take it off, but actually with a typical G17 slide, or at least with Wii, you can actually go and take it to a certain point and pop it out like so. So you don't have to take off this top piece every time. You can just have it, and then to put it on, you need to find these slots right. And there you go. But taking the slide off again, like so. This is basically a totally unmodified Wii slide, except for the kit does come with a plate, which you put in place of the rear sight. Otherwise, the rear sight would not have enough clearance back over this piece here. So in order to install, actually, and like I said, I'll have a separate installation video where I'll go over this in detail. Really all you do is you put this plate on instead of your rear sight. If you have a G18, this is a G17 by the way, I'll go over it in the installation video, but the G18 version for the selector back here comes with a separate thin selector. The stock selector is not going to fit through here. It's a little bit too narrow. So you make really minor modifications to this. Also, as noted, you might want to take out the front sight. And then you put in the hammer group here in the back, just holding that in with a pin. And you put in the trigger bar here. So the hammer group and trigger bar just come in here like that. And it's actually quite clever. See if you can see this here. So you see here, there's a hole here. Normally with Glock triggers, there's a pin here, and this goes through a pin in the trigger, but probably the dimensions are not reliable enough between TM and Wii and VFC to do the same thing. So really here, this just goes in a slot here, which is, it's too dark for you to see, I think, but it goes in a slot, and then this presses, and that operates the trigger fine, just having a little slot and cut out there within this trigger. Because of that, you're not going to have like incredible trigger and such. The other thing here is that typically the Glock, so you can see here, very hard to see. Typically the Glock thing, there is a screw here, and a better light here. Typically with the Glock, there's a screw that goes down in here to hold in the hammer housing firmly. Because of this, and again, there's no instructions. I'll put something up if I'm wrong here, but I think I'm right. There's no instructions, so, and you have this plastic part here, so I don't think you can screw anything onto there. It seems fine to be held on just by this spring down, or this pin down here rather, but then you do get a little play here. So between a little bit of play and then this not being fully fixed, the trigger might be a little bit mushy, but honestly, it's not so much that I really am bothered by it. And putting this back together here, putting the front back on as well, we're gonna now look down at the handle in the bottom here. So, as I briefly showed you before, the handle comes like this, and it is on a spring, so that once it locks in this place, it gets over a little hump here. But then once it goes a little bit, it'll pop right into place. Of course, if you put in a magazine, this has a lot more kind of weight to overcome, so it's not going to fully go up. This is of course going against gravity. It works pretty well once you have it like this. That was a little bit soft, but it did get in there and lock in. You can also use, of course, extended magazines as normal, but you can also actually fold it up with an extended magazine. So this folds up here. This, you can press this little button down here, kind of undo this triangle, then press this down. This snaps into place. There's no way to lock this in, this little front handle, if you will. But for an extended magazine, you can lock this in. With the extended magazine, normally it's not going to look like it's going to fit in, but then you can press it a little bit further. And the mag release has a little bit of a cutout there. So normally a mag release, it'll lock in to here, right? But the magazine release on this has a little bit of a cutout, which allows you to, the magazine, this has a little cutout, which allows you to push it up further, like so. Sorry, it's a little bit big to get on camera. And then you can fold it into place like this, and then press it down. And then of course, undo it. Don't have room here to do it really well. And then once you get this done, and with enough momentum, this will all lock into place, like so. One thing to note, however, is that with this rear part, actually, the stock, this is just a stock Wii extended mag here. There's not quite enough room for the base plates to go in here on the nylon of the rear stock here, right? It pushes out, it works, but it pushes out, and then when you're unfolding this with a extended magazine especially, it causes a bit of friction, which can stop the handle from locking into place fully. Because of that, they actually include with the kit, take a look at this here, some slightly slimmer mag bases, one for Marui and Wii and one for VFC here. The slightly slimmer mag bases, which should reduce that friction enough so that you have no trouble opening it. I do find, however, that even with the stock mag base, just give it a little bit of momentum. Sorry, it's mostly off camera there. And it comes out okay. You just got to kind of kick it down a little bit, and it will work with a stock one if you don't want to bother changing the magazine base plate, or you want to have many magazines, because they will include one extra base plate per the company type. One for Marui and Wii and one for VFC. And then finally, of course, we have this stock here, which is again all made of nylon. This is, you know, thin to an extent, and of course it bends a little bit, but it still feels quite solid. And then one thing I hate about folding stocks in general, not this one, but in general folding stocks, is that once you get them in, like the way they often have some wobble to them, this, just the way it's designed, has almost no wobble. Like I'm really cranking this and it is not moving much, even to the side, like a tiny bit for sure, but it feels more solid than a lot of like full like metal folding stocks on a lot of guns. It feels really nice. All these hinges and stuff as well, they're all steel. So all the kind of important structural components, they don't use cheap zinc or anything. They use nice steel components and a nice quality nylon for everything else. This actually feels super solid. I have no problem kind of roughing this around. I have no fear of really damaging this as I'm messing around with it. It feels actually super solid. So zooming back out here, we get to see it without the carry handle on it and with a red dot, for example. Without the red dot, to be honest, it's a quite nice little attractive box package, larger than hand. You could put this in a backpack, no problem, maybe like a massive cargo pants pocket or something like that. This is actually an interesting option for someone who just really wants a kind of compact airsoft carbine. You don't need to lug around in a big specialized bag, just put it in a backpack and go to your airsoft field. At least theoretically, of course. The reality is, though, that this is a bit on the expensive side. This is the price discussion which we do have to make with something like this. This is super cool. I think it's super well made. It's made by a small company and I like to support them. But you should know that this cost me, I think, 330 to 350-ish US dollars. I forget the exact conversion from Taiwanese dollars because I bought this in Taiwan. In Japan and in the US and other places, I expect this to be a bit more expensive. It might push $400 in some place, and that's without the internals, that's without the gun, that's without any of these sort of accessories I'm showing here, just the kit. So it costs some money. It really comes down to what the value of this is for you. But if you want this FMG9, if you want to live your COD Modern Warfare 3, I think was the one where they had this, then it was quite overpowered for a while there. If you want to live out those dreams, this is your kit to go to, because the other one, the previous one made by KWA, is like $1,000 minimum now. And then also, I believe that's all mostly proprietary stuff. This, you can put in a variety of Glocks. You can even swap them out. So you can have a Glock 17, you can have the Glock 18 style for the full auto. You can do a bunch of stuff with this, and I think it is very well put together. It's just a question of how much money you want to spend to get it. Now, if you're interested in knowing some more about this, as I said, I will later on be putting up a instruction video on how to put this all together. It's not too complicated, but if you're new to the sport, you may need some help doing so, and there's no manual with this. So I'm going to make a video on how to put it together, and for that I'll also be showing off the G18 Glock slide and some full auto firing if you're so inclined. So thanks for watching, and I hope that this has piqued your interest in this kit. As I said, stick around. There'll be links in the description down below, and also at the end of this video you'll be linked to the installation video and perhaps any other videos I do on this kit as I get some more experience with it. Thanks for hanging around and listening.